So here's the thing. I could give you 1, 2, 5, heck, even 10 reasons why you should start remote closing in 2025, but that's too easy. Today, I'm gonna give you 26 reasons why not only should you start remote closing in 2025, but why it's the best online business side hustle that you can start no matter what. But Aaron, 26, that's the amount of letters that are in the alphabet. Exactly. So my challenge today is every single one that I give you of the 26 will start with a different letter of the alphabet, starting with A, which is access to big money faster. So if we're looking at any of these other online businesses, right, starting an AI agency, drop shipping, Amazon FBA, affiliate marketing, right, what you need to do is initially you build out the product, the service, whatever it may be, and then you get to sell it to then make money. But then obviously on the back end, you have to fulfill it and go through all the complexity of doing that. With remote closing, right, with high ticket sales is people already, like you're partnering with people that already have done the heavy lifting. And then you just come in, you sell an already proven product that has the testimonials, that has the case studies from the fulfillment team, and you can leverage those things in order to sell it and make a commission, right? A percentage off the top. So let's say you're selling a product that's $10,000 or $15,000. Well, guess what? You get access to the big money faster than if you were to try it and go do it yourself. So jumping into B, second letter in the alphabet, is built-in demand. So with these high ticket companies, right? These are businesses, owners, CEOs, founders, right? They are trying to build their businesses and their time. Let's just use Alex Hormozi, for example, right? Alex Hormozi does not sit on phone calls all day, right? He doesn't take sales calls by himself, right? He doesn't jump on these calls because he knows that his time is worth, way higher up here than sitting on the conversations with interested prospects. Now, he is a little bit different. He has a big brand, right? He has the ability to do so. But with that being said, because he has a brand, because he's generating sales calls, and he's not the only one that does this, right? There's thousands of other coaches, consultants, agencies that are actively looking for, heck, we have 600 active clients on our B2B division that is looking for clients. And hey, by the way, like we'll train you up and actually place you into some of those businesses. But that being said, there is built-in demand for this specific skill set, right? There really isn't any demand for another drop shipping store to be created, or there's no demand for another, agency to be started, but there's always a demand for salespeople, and it's been that way for thousands and thousands of years. So C, cash flow without capital. So what that means is you're able to make money, right? You can go in, you can partner with one of these businesses without all the different softwares or the subscriptions or things that you have to buy into, right? Not to mention the the fulfillment costs, right? If you're someone that's just wanting to start a business or you're brand new to the game, you're probably not going to want to actually fulfill the thing yourself. You're going to want to outsource that to someone else that already has the experience. So you basically got to throw out all this money before you even make your own money yourself. So you make cash flow without the capital when you get started with remote closing. So D, done for you products. So we've kind of touched on this one already, but done for you products basically means that you don't actually have to do anything with the product itself, right? You are focusing on the one skill of closing, the one skill of sales. They already have the product built out. It's done for you, right? So then you're just selling the product that's already proven. It's already proven to work, and you don't have to go through the complexities of building out your own product. E, earnings potential. We're probably going to hit money a couple times in this one, but the earnings potential of being a remote closer. So, here's the thing. I made a couple other videos on the channel recently about the best online businesses to start. And the thing is, I think any of just being transparent, any of these business models has some pretty crazy earning potential, right? But again, it's the way that I look at it is, okay, cool. Earnings potential is up here, but how long does it take to get to that earnings potential, right? I guess if we're going back to A, right, you get access to big money fast. With earnings potential, it's it's really high, right? From a closing perspective, and that's really in any sales environment. You know what I mean? So earnings potential that fit my E, so I put that in there. Let's jump into F, which is freedom of location. So everyone always wants to live the laptop lifestyle, right? They want to be able to travel, move where they want. To be honest, I'm pretty boring. I have a family, and it's pretty hard to. We have a 6, 5, 4-year-old, and then a 1-year-old. If you have kids, you will probably agree with me that it's not the easiest to travel with kids. So we're not really in this travel mode right now, but the one thing that I do look forward to is the ability, let's say when they all get a little bit older, we're going to be going on vacations, right? We're going to be going to the lake. We're going to be going to Disney World, maybe a couple times a year. I don't know what they're going to like when they're older, but kids love Disney World. So I know that I will have the freedom of location when they do get older. But if you're someone that doesn't have kids and you can kind of do whatever you want, you can do remote closing from wherever you want in the world, right? I know that's one of the biggest things that I've seen, from a remote closing aspect. There's someone that I follow that they're in Paris with some, actually a woman that's in in remote closing. She's in Paris right now, so it's pretty cool to see. So let's jump into G, which is growth opportunity. So here's the piece that is a little bit deeper in the rabbit hole of remote closing. Is a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to become a setter, right? Or an appointment setter that goes into a closer, and they're like, that's it. And that's actually not the case. So just to give you some insights, I actually came in as an appointment setter with Cole Gordon back in 2021, and started as an appointment setter, upgraded into a closer, upgraded into what is called like a sales manager. So there was a point where this YouTube channel was generating enough leads to make it make sense to bring in more closers. So I would kind of like oversee and help manage the closing team. And then even above that, now I'm actually a partner within the business. So this isn't abnormal. If you come in with a business and you can show that like you are a direct driver of revenue, then the owners and the founders and the higher up people within the companies are going to look at you as an extremely valuable asset. So there can be a point where instead of just making money on what you can sell, you can make money on what other people that you're managing actually sell. So there's really no ceiling when it comes to the companies, and I think a lot of people get scared. They're like, oh, I can only make X amount. It's like, well, no, like I've known people that have made upwards of $200,000 to $300,000 a month by being a higher up within the company after starting as just a salesperson. So H is high ROI on your time. So I'm not gonna try to say like, okay, if you're making 60 minute call and you make $1,000, you're gonna make $1,000 for 40 hours a week. That's just not what I'm gonna say. However, is you just have the higher leverage. So for example, if you're going to a 9 to 5 and you work for 8 hours, right? 8 hours every single day. You have the ability through high ticket closing, right? If you're on the right offer and you're collecting the right amount of cash, then there's opportunities where you can make $2,000 to $3,000 an hour, right? In an hour call. Now, obviously you're not going to close at 100%. You're not going to, collect cash, all the way up front. But when you just kind of put the two and two together, instead of just saying, oh, well, like, I'm going to go to this job for 40 hours and just make the same amount, is you have the control and the ability to change your income if your skills also up level. A lot of times in a regular job, right, is you might get a raise, right? Maybe a couple $1,000s a year, but that's also something where you have to work for like a year or 2 years in order to get a little tiny bit more. So I'm not about that life, if you haven't realized by now. Instant leverage of other people's brands. So this is a huge one, especially in 2025. So if we're looking at 2020, 2021, much simpler times, if I'm being honest with you guys. And I'm not saying it's hard now, but there's just a different process, right? It's just a different game. So there's this thing that is called, that's been floating around called the trust recession. And what this means is back in 2020, there was thousands upon tens of thousands of online businesses, online coaches, right? The people that we sell for as remote closers actually came about. Now, because there's been this massive wave of people, I mean, this grew from a $2.3 billion industry to over like 300 billion now. It's actually projected to be over like 2.3 trillion by 2033 or 2036. So this is not going anywhere. So what's happening is there's less trust because there's so many people in the market, a lot of people, to be honest, taking advantage of people. So what that does is it brings the trust level of a lot of people really, really down because they might have been burned in the past. So what this brings back to the instant leverage of other people's brands is if somebody already has a brand, right? They have an Instagram, they have a YouTube, they're known in this space, is you can just leverage that brand as your own, right? And you can then leverage that to be able to make sales easier for yourself, right? Versus if you just start your own thing, you're gonna have to start from the ground up and actually build that brand. Now, is that a bad thing? Like, no, if you ever wanna start your own thing, you're obviously gonna have to start somewhere, but it makes so much more sense to just at the very beginning to be able to stack up a ton of cash to start your own thing, is leverage somebody else's brand and make money while you're learning and while you're growing and while you're learning all these different skill sets. So anyway, instant leverage of other people's brands. J, job security. I put down here digital world, but honestly, this is like just job security in general, right? Like if you think about sales, and I think sales gets this bad rep. I've talked about it a lot on this channel, but it's like, sales seems like this really scummy, really salesy thing, right? It's within the name, but really all it is helping people go from where they are to where they want to be. And this has been done, I mean, since the beginning of time, right? Since like the caveman days when people were selling, they were selling rocks as wheels. You know what I mean? It's like they had to understand communication to be like, okay, well, like you currently don't have a wheel. And your pain point right now is it's taking you a long time to get from point A to point B. Well, guess what? If you have this wheel, and you give me this thing in exchange, maybe a couple of berries, then guess what? I'll give you this wheel. So again, like that's a very antiquated example, but you will never run out of the ability to make money in any circumstance, in any part of the world, because you always need to have the skill set of sales. So next up is K, which is for knowledge transfer. Now I kind of touched on this a second ago, but essentially when you're working with a business, right? With me working with Cole Gordon or anyone working in any of these businesses as just a regular salesperson, is there's multiple steps, there's multiple skill sets you need to learn within those businesses. And really, if I had to break it down to 5, it would be the initial like foundation. It's the marketing, it's the sales, it's the fulfillment, it's the operations, and the finance, right? These are all very necessary, mandatory skills in order for you to learn to scale your own business. So if you just start, and I'll just tell my own story. When I first started trying to build my own businesses, I didn't know any of these skills. I didn't know sales. I didn't really know marketing. I didn't know fulfillment. I didn't know finance, right? I didn't know how to do any of these things. So I was like trying to figure them out by myself, versus when I first jumped into a company and started selling for Cole, is I started to learn just as a byproduct of being on the team. Oh, here's how to do marketing. Here's how to do sales in the right way. Here's how the fulfillment works. Here's how the P&L, the budget sheets to look, right? So it's like you get paid, you physically, like literally get paid to learn inside of a business, as long as you pick the right one, right? A business that is flourishing and a business that has already gone through the hardships of learning it. So instead of like buying a course, right, you learn it internally within those businesses. So knowledge transfer is huge. L, low barrier to entry. Now, I'm not going to say that if you have no experience and if you have no skill sets and you've never sold a thing in your life, I'm not going to say that you're just going to jump into remote closing and like immediately see success. That's not, I mean, that would be unethical for me to say, to be honest. But because they're like, even with us, like when we're recruiting for people, is experience, like, yes, we're kind of looking for some experience, but one of the biggest things, if someone comes in, they're like, hey, like I'm hungry, I'm willing to learn, and I really want to crush it for you. Like and if they're like, they don't necessarily have to be young, but if they're just hungry and they're ready and they want to learn, I'm going to take that person over the person that like has been in sales for 15 years and they think that they're hot stuff. And, they come from like, a little bit of an older school industry. I'm going to take the first person all the time, because they're just going to be more hungry. So, there is a low barrier to entry, but I don't mean to say that as like, you don't have to have any experience or not be hungry. It's just going to be this really easy thing. It's not. But the barrier to entry is pretty low. Jumping into M is minimal overhead. So when I say minimal, like as a remote closer, it's like all you really need is a laptop and an internet connection, right? So you need to pay for your internet. You need to pay for a laptop if you don't have one. I would definitely have one that's a little bit more like upgraded. And then, at the very least, like some sort of lighting. You don't have to go like crazy like I do. Obviously, I make these videos look good for you guys, but as long as you have those 3 things, you have the ability to make money. Now, if we're saying, again, we're comparing and contrasting this to anything else, right? If you're starting a drop shipping business, for example, you got to buy the product, the inventory, the space to store the stuff, things like that. With, let's say an agency, you have to build, all the subscriptions, especially if you do an AI agency. I mean, that stuff racks up. Don't ask me why I know that, because I spend probably $1,000 a month on just AI, like every AI product out there. I should probably look and delete some of those things. I hope my wife doesn't see this. N is no guesswork in marketing. So like I talked about before, there's those 5 to 6 different skills you need to know. Is if you're starting your own business, here's the biggest thing that I've seen. I've seen and have coached and worked with so many people that have gone into remote closing where they're like, Aaron, I tried my own business and I thought that if I just like built this thing, then people are going to come. It's not the case, right? If you don't know how to do cold outreach and do a ton of cold outreach, cold calls, cold email, things like that, or you have the budget to put thousands upon thousands of dollars a month into advertising, then it's going to be really hard to get off the ground. And trust me, like that was me. When I first started one of my businesses, I was trying the cold outreach. I was trying, and just from sheer like brute force, I made it work and made some okay money. But I mean, it took months. I mean, like 6+ months to even learn how to do the right outreach. And this was like thousands upon thousands of cold outreaches. So if you like cold calling, feel free. But yeah, no guesswork in marketing. You're plugging into a system where leads are generated for you. Calls are generated for you directly on your calendar. And all you got to do is show up on your meetings. So, opportunity to work with top players in the industry. So here's a really cool part. Like networking is really big. In the online space. It is a big industry, but the people that are doing the best it's a very tight-knit community is what I'll say. And you have the opportunity, if you jump into a team, and you have like killers on that team, right? You have the ability to learn from those people and be able to like pick up on some of their skill sets, on the ways that they speak, on the ways that they close, right? Some of their like specific admin, like it could be really, really small, like admin task efficiencies that they create, but it's just huge to be able to network and be in the same room. Maybe not even with just like the closers, but other people in the team, right? Maybe the founder is someone that you've looked. I've seen this happen all the time. Is someone will come into, whether it's the Remote Closing Academy or just I hear the story of someone, is they're like, yeah, I followed this one dude for like this really long time and I really love their service. And then I become their closer. And it's like, I'm working directly with like my idol basically. And at that point, it's like, is it even work at that point, right? You're talking to the person that you've, most likely been watching a ton of their content and you feel already connected to anyway. So just the opportunities to network are pretty insane. Now, jumping into P is predictable income. I put a very big asterisk here though, saying once you are skilled. So I'm not gonna say that you're gonna go into a company and you don't have any skills and it's gonna be just super predictable income. That's not the case. What you're gonna need to what's gonna need to happen is you build up the skill set and you get to a point where you build up your own personal KPIs, right? And then what happens is, let's say, for example's sake, we'll keep numbers simple, is let's say you sell a $10,000 offer, right? 10%, because you're gonna make 10% of those closes, right? So you're gonna make $1,000 on every sale you make at a $10,000 price point. So 20%, right? Let's say you wanna make 20 grand a month. Well, that means you need to close 20 deals. So if you close at 20%, that means you would need to have 100 calls in order to close 20 deals. So the reason I put predictable is now you can say, okay, so based on averages, if I wanna make 20 grand a month, I just need to take 100 calls. Right? Or if you're like, I want to make 30 grand a month. Okay, I just need to take, I just need to close or you have X amount more calls. My brain doesn't work in in percentages. I'm right off the bat here, but yeah. So predictable income again, only if you're skilled though. But it does become pretty lethal when you do get to that point. Jumping into Q is quick skill ramp up. Now, I want to put another asterisk on this one. Is quick, I don't mean quick in the sense of like, all right, you're going to jump into remote closing today and you're going to see success tomorrow. Now, it's dependent on how much work you put into it, but I'm comparing it to, let's say, like a university, for example. Like if you go to university, you're going to have to build up skills for 4 years, right? In order to like potentially get a job. Or, if you're doing, your own business, it's like you have to build up your skills and ramp up those skills in order to be able to sell and be good at those things. And then most importantly, feel confidence in the things that you're selling in order to, start making good money. So with this, it's like you just ramp up sales. That's it. You learn that. And then you start making sales. So quick skill ramp up in comparison to into other business models. R, recurring commission potential. So as a remote closer, essentially what happens is, and again, setting proper expectations here, is if you're gonna close a $10,000 deal, right? The commissions that you make are gonna be based on your ability to collect cash. So if you close a $10,000 deal and let's say you only collect, 5,000 of that, right? You're not going to make commissions on the 10,000, right? Because at that point, if you're not collecting the cash, then it's kind of like imaginary money. So if you only collect 5,000 of the 10,000, then you are going to, make the $500 on that sale. Now, what I mean by recurring is what happens is that person, right? They're coming in on the 10K, they're coming in on a payment plan. So what happens is, let's say you set them up on a payment plan to then pay the 5,000 next month. So what happens is you're going to make the 500 this month. And then when they pay again next month, you're going to make that 500, right? It's called accounts receivable that you're making those commissions on. So if you start to think about it, right? It's like, yeah, you're not making as much on the front end because this is all 100% dependent on your ability to collect cash and objection handle and really get the most possible. But, there will be a situation where, let's say over a month-long period, let's say you, again, keep numbers simple. Let's say you stack up 10 of those, right? 10 people that are going to pay $500 the next month. So guess what? Now you have $5,000 that are going to come in next month without you having to make another sale. And on top of that, there are some agencies that, if you sell, let's say like a $3,500 a month product or $5,000 a month product, you make $500 off of each of those. If the fulfillment is good and they continue to stay, don't quote me on this because it's not the same for every single one. Some of them will only do it for like the first 3 month plan, but some of them will just be like, hey, you can make commissions on as long as they stay a client. And then obviously you can get to a point where you're making a pretty good amount on a recurring basis if you find one of those one of those offers. So S is scalable skill. We did a little SS there. So scalable skill. So again, you learn appointment setting, you learn closing, and then you continue to upgrade your skill sets, right? So when you go from appointment setting to closing, that's obviously a really big jump. But from closing to being able to sell a $1,000 product, to being able to sell a $10,000 product, to being able to sell a $50,000 product is, it's not a drastic increase in skill set, but there's definitely, a good amount of skills that you do continue to learn by closing the higher value deals. T, time flexibility. So this is something where, we have a couple closers that are working with us right now. And, a lot of people like to, hey, I'm only going to work these hours, or I'm only going to work these days. Now, setting expectations again here is you're not going to be able to work 2 hours a day and make $50,000 a month. It's just not the case, right? So time flexibility, I think the word is more in like the flexibility, is you have the flexibility to take calls when you want, right? Not take calls on certain days if you want, but just keep in mind that you are your own boss at this point, and to an extent, and you are only going to make money based on the amount of calls that you're taking, right? So just keep that in mind, but it is flexible. All right, we're jumping into the home stretch with the last 6 here. We got U, which is unlimited earning ceiling. So here's a big piece that a lot of people just can't wrap their head around, especially if someone comes from like, just a regular hour to hour job, right? Is you are not trading time for money, right? You are being able to make as much money as possible, as much as you want, right? I know closers that can do $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 consistently every single month. And it's just because they like lock themselves in their room and they grind it out. Now, does everyone need to do that? No. But if your initial goal is to make $20,000 a month on a consistent basis, it's like, you have the ability to do that because, again, you're able to not manipulate, that's not the right word, but you're able to move things around and take calls that are going to allow you to hit that point, right? So I think it's a big mindset shift for a lot of people that come from trading time for money, but just understand that unlimited earning ceiling is there if you're willing to take it. V, validation from the market. Very, very big thing that I struggled with when I first started. And I had, don't get me wrong, I had like 6 or 7 different businesses that I started. But the issue was validating that specific offer for the market. So here's what a lot of people think is they're like, I mentioned this earlier, right? If I just build this thing, then people are going to love it, right? AI is really big. So if I start this AI agency, then it's going to be really easy to sign clients. Well, the thing is in theory, that might make sense, right? AI is a hot topic. But at the same time, it's like for you to be able to take that idea, turn it into a product or service, bring it into a business, validate it to where they're getting good results for them to justify continuing to pay you on a monthly basis if you're an agency, that takes months, right? Unless you're like a savage, you really understand sales, you have the motivation like a freaking, I don't know, like an 18-year-old, right? You're grinding it out. You have this like really, this really this big focus and drive and energy and motivation, right? You can probably do it a lot faster. But for most people, it's just not the case, right? So you got to validate the product that you want to sell. You have to validate to the market. Guess what? With this, it's already pre-validated, right? When you start with over here, I'm talking about remote closing, right? It's like it's already pre-validated, and these services have been sold dozens, if not hundreds of times by the time you get, part of the company. So it allows you to sell with conviction, which is very, very important. W, work-life balance. This one is going to be completely dependent on you, right? Like I said a second ago, if you want to go crazy and just like all you do is take calls all day long, cool, do that. But it also gives the opportunity, a lot of our closers is they take calls from, a certain time to a certain time. Everything else, we don't talk to them. Or that's not what I mean. But you know what I mean, right? It's like we don't expect like, oh, hey, like you need to take calls until 9 p.m. That's just not the case. It just gives you the ability to have that work-life balance as long as you're open. Or as long as you're open in communication with sales managers and people within the company. X is the X factor. You got to be nice with me on this one. This one was hard. X factor skill set. So the X factor skill set is, again, when you learn sales, you are learning the one skill that you can take into any other business, any other product, any other service. If you can sell and you learn how to sell at a high level, and again, even just using my own personal experience, is when I had my other businesses, the main reason I wasn't able to really build those companies is because I didn't understand sales. I didn't understand communication. I didn't understand, what are the questions I need to ask? How do I get someone to make a decision based on not me make them make a decision, right? Because that's manipulation, but help them make a decision based on what they want and help them get closer to that for themselves, right? And learning that skill set I know I will never run out. I mean, it might sound weird, but I'll never run out of the opportunity to make money because I understand this skill now. No matter what I go on to, if I wanted to start, my brand, like my own business, down the road, that's 100% mine, solely mine. I know I wouldn't have a problem doing that because I have this X factor skill set. So be nice with me. X was a tough one. Why? Your network grows fast. So this is a huge one within the space, like I talked about earlier, is it's a very connected, very tight-knit space when you're at the top. So what happens is, let's say you work with a company. What's going to happen is you're going to, be in a group with different sales managers, different people. And, down the road, it's really actually cool to see is with the Remote Closing Academy is there was a group of students that came through the academy, probably about 6 or 7 of them. Actually, out of the 6 and 7, I think like 5 or 6 of them were on our podcast, but they went through the Remote Closing Academy and they actually started their own like group outside of RCA, and they did it around it's called setter to closer, and basically they teach people how to go from like appointment setter to a closer, which is really, really cool. But it just shows that like you really build your network, and I know a lot of people that are doing that, and just like within the different networks, going to different events, it's like you just get connected with a lot of people and you never know, hey, like this person's a good closer, this person's a good marketer, so then when let's say you decide to start your own business, it's like, hey, I know this guy that I used to work with was a good appointment setter, this guy was a good closer, this guy was a good marketer, this guy was a good, this, that, the other thing, whatever, from the connections that you build within the network. And then you're like, hey, you reach out to them and it's like, now you have the skill set, now you have the skill set of sales. You can tell them, hey, come work with me, let's build out this thing together. And that's kind of what these guys did for setter to closer. Last but not least, we made it, guys. Zero need to be internet famous. So back like what I talked about earlier in terms of like the leveraging other people's brand at L is you don't have to have your own brand and be internet famous in order to do this, right? You can leverage somebody else's brand. They're already generating calls, generating leads for you. So now all you're doing is you're just taking these calls and you don't have to build a brand, right? And I will say, like, obviously building a brand is very important in my opinion, like if you were to start your own business, but with this, it's like you don't have to do that. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of closers that we have on our teams that they don't have any following. They like, some of them don't even post on social media. They just like take the calls, they close the calls, they make good money, and they up-level their lifestyles, up-level their skill sets, things like that. So that being said, I've talked for long enough on this one. That was definitely quite the challenge. A to Z, 26 reasons why remote closing is better than any other online business. Hopefully you enjoyed. If at this point you're sold and you're like, hey, remote closing sounds like a really interesting thing, you can click the first link down in the description below, and it'll actually bring you to a full-on training that goes through not only what remote closing is, goes a little bit more in detail about it, but also how you can get placed in a job, why it's a super valuable skill set, and everything from A to Z if you want to check that out. Now, if you don't want to watch that training, there's actually this training right here you can click that's going to bring you over to a 4-hour masterclass from beginning to end of how to get started with remote closing. Goes through the scripts, going through what is appointment setting, what is closing, all that type of stuff. It'll give you everything you need if you click the video on screen now.